At my graduation dinner, my parents shocked me with an impossible demand to give my entire inheritance to my sister. I refused. As they watched my diploma burn in front of everyone, I stayed calm and walked away. But the real reckoning came a week later at the lawyer's office, and that's when they finally realized why I hadn't lost my composure that night. My name is Lila Montgomery, and I had spent my entire life learning how to shrink into the corners of a room. Not because I lacked ideas or courage, but because in my family, silence was a survival skill. That night, at my graduation dinner in a quiet, upscale restaurant in downtown Portland, I discovered that skill had carried me further than anyone imagined, but it was about to be tested in ways I hadn't yet prepared for. My parents, Richard and Ann Montgomery, had always been obsessed with appearances. Their friends saw a picture-perfect household, shiny floors, matching silverware, and a daughter they proudly flaunted at every social gathering. My younger sister, Felicity. Felicity was effortless in the spotlight, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, had been the steady, practical one, the daughter who got overlooked in family photos, whose achievements were quietly noted if at all, the one who had learned early that approval had to be earned through service, patience, and silence. From a young age, it had been clear where I stood. At 12, while my parents drove Felicity to a weekend art workshop, I carried my science fair project across town on foot because no one had time to check on me. At 16, when I received a scholarship to a summer research program, my parents barely glanced up from their wine glasses while Felicity recited poetry at a private recital. Grandpa James, the one adult who truly understood me, had always been different. He believed in quiet diligence, in thoughtful preparation, in proving strength through action rather than performance. It was he who had taught me that sometimes staying silent wasn't surrender, it was strategy. That evening, the polished restaurant smelled faintly of roasted chicken, garlic, and the subtle tang of lemon-scented cleaning spray. Warm light reflected off the crystal glasses and polished silver, masking the tension that was already building. I wanted to savor this night, to feel some semblance of normalcy before the storm I could sense hovering in the air. Then came the folder. Richard slid it across the table as if it were a simple menu choice. "Lila," he said, calm but with an edge that cut deeper than any raised voice. "This is important. Read it carefully." And leaned forward, lips pressed tight. Felicity tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, smiling with a smug, knowing look, as though she already understood the ending of a story I hadn't been told. I opened the folder slowly. Financial statements, property deeds, notarized forms. My pulse jumped, but I stayed composed. I knew this wasn't casual conversation. It was a carefully orchestrated ambush. Richard spoke again, voice low, deliberate. "Your inheritance. It should go to Felicity. She's just starting out, and she deserves it more than you." I set the folder down, feeling a quiet certainty settle over me. "I won't sign it," I said. The words landed like stones on water. Felicity blinked in disbelief. Anne's jaw tightened, a thin line of disapproval cutting across her face. Richard's eyes narrowed, as if he believed he could bend me with sheer insistence. "You don't understand what this will do," he said, leaning closer. "This is for the family's sake." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand perfectly. But I'm not handing over what was rightfully mine." Felicity scoffed, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Come on, Lila. Grandpa didn't even know you well. Why would he leave you anything substantial?" Her words were meant to sting, but instead, they crystallized a truth I had known for years. I had always been invisible in their eyes, a placeholder, someone useful but never valued. I inhaled slowly, letting the quiet around me sharpen my resolve. That's when Richard made his move. He reached into his jacket, producing a lighter, and flicked it toward my diploma lying beside the folder. "You don't deserve this," he said. The flame licked the edge of the paper. Guests gasped. Silverware clinked. A server froze mid-step. But I didn't flinch. The paper curled, blackened, and fell into ash, and inside me, something settled. A calm, unshakable clarity. Years of being dismissed, overlooked, and managed like a nuisance coalesced into a single undeniable realization. Nothing they could burn, nothing they could threaten, could touch the life I had built. I stood, smoothing my dress, letting the soft light play over the contours of my calm. "Are we done?" I asked quietly. Felicity reached out, hand hovering midair. "Don't be dramatic, Lila," she sneered. I stepped back, out of reach. Anne's voice finally pierced the silence, low and cold. "Leaving now will divide the family." I let a small, ironic smile cross my face. The family was divided long before I learned how to spell my own name. I'm not creating division. I'm stepping out of a performance I never agreed to participate in. And then I walked. Out of the restaurant, out of the suffocating expectation, out of the control they had tried to wield over me my entire life. Heels clicked softly against the tile as I passed stunned relatives and silent guests. Outside, the night air was cool and grounding, smelling faintly of rain and asphalt. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I didn't go home. I went to my Aunt Marissa's apartment in the city. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer pity. She only offered space, warmth, and quiet understanding. I sat on her couch, replaying the night not with anger, but with clarity. The cruelty I'd witnessed wasn't sudden. It had been calculated, repeated over decades. And I hadn't broken. I had smiled. I had walked away. And the truth, finally, was mine. By the following morning, sunlight poured through the thin curtains. I felt a strange steadiness, a calm that replaced the knot of anxiety in my chest. My phone vibrated relentlessly. Felicity's texts came first, dripping with smug entitlement. "Thanks for letting me have the room. I'm repainting it blush pink. Don't mind, right?" I ignored her. Then came an email from Richard, 3 long paragraphs of accusations, instructions, and guilt-tripping, all carefully crafted to make me feel selfish. Finally, and cold, pressing for negotiation. But I knew the conversation that mattered would not be over the phone. I opened my laptop and sent a single email to my lawyer, Mr. Harrington. "It's time." His prompt reply confirmed what I'd already known. Next week, the Montgomerys would meet me in his office, and for the first time, they would see why I had been calm all along. The rest of the week passed quietly, almost unnervingly so. I immersed myself in my work, code reviews and software architecture filling the hours. In the evenings, I helped my aunt with small tasks, watched old films, drank tea, and allowed the stillness to sharpen my thoughts. I didn't rush. I didn't fret. I prepared. When the day arrived, the California sun glinted off the tall windows of Mr. Harrington's office. I smoothed my blazer, inhaled deeply, and walked into the lobby. The smell of polished wood and citrus cleaner filled the air. He greeted me solemnly. "They're on their way. Are you ready?" "I've been ready for years," I said. The conference room smelled faintly of leather polish and printer ink. Light spilled in from the tall windows, illuminating the polished table where my parents, sister, and I would soon face the reckoning they had orchestrated for me. For years, they had tried to control my life with subtle manipulations, withholds of praise, and silent judgments. But now the power had shifted, and I was calm, prepared, and steady. Richard entered first, his jaw tight, shoulders rigid. And followed, her expression carefully composed but strained beneath the surface. Felicity trailed behind, phone in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like she was expecting a casual brunch instead of a legal confrontation. Her confident smirk faltered when she saw me seated across from her. Mr. Harrington gestured to the stack of documents at the center of the table. As outlined in the official will of Mr. Montgomery, the estate, including properties, investments, and all business interests, is to be transferred solely to his granddaughter, Lila Montgomery. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Richard's face twisted from confusion to disbelief, Anne's lips parted in shock, and Felicity's jaw dropped. "That's impossible," Richard blurted, leaning forward as if sheer force could undo the legal facts before him. "Your grandfather promised." "No," Mr. Harrington interrupted calmly, flipping through the folder. "He didn't." Felicity slammed her hand on the table, a sharp, angry punctuation. "I already committed to the art studio. You can't just." I held her gaze evenly, voice soft but firm. "It's not yours to claim. Grandpa trusted me to handle this, and I intend to honor that trust." She froze, blinking in disbelief. For the first time in her life, I saw her unsure, and looked down, a flicker of tears threatening to spill, while Richard tried again, leaning into the familiar parental authority he had wielded over me for decades. "You're too young to manage this," he insisted, voice rising slightly. "You'll ruin everything." "Felicity is prepared." "Prepared," I echoed, quieter than a whisper, but sharper than any scream. "She's entitled. And you taught her to be." The silence that followed was thick, oppressive, revealing. No one dared to interrupt as Mr. Harrington clicked a button on his remote. A screen lit up on the wall, and the room dimmed slightly. The video began. Grandpa James, frail but still sharp-eyed, sat in his study. His voice, calm but resolute, filled the room. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means Lila kept her promise to remain silent until the time was right. I watched everything. The favoritism, the dismissals, the countless times you overlooked her. I saw her grow strong, quietly, in ways you never noticed. And I trusted her because strength should be respected, not exploited." And gasped, bringing a hand to her mouth. Richard's face froze, eyes wide, while Felicity whispered, "No." Grandpa's words continued, each sentence a quiet hammer striking the illusions they had built around themselves. "She cared for the family in ways you never acknowledged. She sacrificed for the company, for the household, for you. And yet, you believed your control would last forever. But the time has come for truth." I placed my hands lightly on the table, feeling the weight of every year, every slight, every expectation dissolve beneath the clarity of his voice. "This isn't revenge," I said softly, steady as steel. "This is justice. And these documents," I gestured to the contracts before me, "are me choosing myself." Richard's face crumpled, not in remorse, but in the realization that control had slipped from his fingers. Anne's tears ran freely now. Felicity buried her face in her hands, shaking, as the future she had assumed would be hers unraveled in real time. I gathered the documents Mr. Harrington handed me, sliding them neatly into my leather folder. I looked at Richard squarely. "You burned my diploma," I said, voice calm, deliberate. "But you didn't burn my future." No one spoke. No one dared. I turned and walked toward the door. Each step was deliberate, steady, affirming the years of quiet preparation that had led me here. The office lights reflected off the glass as I left, and when I stepped outside, the California sun felt impossibly warm. For the first time, it didn't sting. It embraced. The following months were transformative. I moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of San Jose, near the tech district where I could walk or bike to work. The space wasn't large, but it was mine, safe, and unencumbered by the weight of past expectations. On my desk, I kept a single-framed photograph. Grandpa and me, laughing together in the backyard, a quiet memory of trust and recognition. Work changed, too. I stepped into a leadership role at the company, restructuring teams, eliminating favoritism, and bringing competence and clarity where there had once been chaos. Employees who had seemed resigned to mediocrity now met me with steady, hopeful eyes. I found satisfaction not in dominance, but in building a space where fairness and respect mattered more than pedigree or charm. The Montgomerys never contacted me again. Not a call, not a message, not even a passive attempt from Felicity, who once couldn't remain silent for more than an hour. And I didn't miss them. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace, steady, earned, and grounded. At night, I would stand on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, feeling the breeze brush past me, untethered. For once, my mind was still. I didn't replay old conversations or second-guess my worth. I wasn't shrinking to make anyone else comfortable. I was living, fully, unapologetically, and quietly triumphant. Sometimes, I would think back to that night at the restaurant. The flicker of the lighter. The curling ash of my diploma. The silence that had held more power than any shouting could. And I realized something essential. Strength isn't loud. Strength is choosing yourself, even when no one applauds, even when the people who should have loved you most try to burn everything you've earned. Grandpa James had trusted me to see it through, and I had. I honored his trust by waiting, by preparing, and by moving with patience, clarity, and unshakable calm. And that trust had changed everything. I had inherited more than just wealth or property. I had inherited independence, respect for myself, and the quiet satisfaction of finally being seen. Not as a placeholder, not as an afterthought, but as the person I had always been, fully capable, fully deserving. No one could take that away. Sometimes, when the city hummed below me, I would allow myself a small private smile, remembering Felicity's shocked expression, Anne's silent tears, Richard's crumpled face, and the astonished gasps of the guests at my graduation dinner. That night had been a performance for them. But I had turned it into a revelation for me. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't seeking vengeance for the sake of it. I had simply chosen to step into my own life, fully and unapologetically. And the world responded in kind. Doors opened, opportunities multiplied, and for the first time, I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. Strength, I realized, was never about control over others. It was about claiming your own, refusing to be diminished, and stepping out of a narrative written by someone else. That night, I had finally done that. Lila Montgomery was no longer a quiet, overlooked daughter. She was a woman who had reclaimed her future, honored her grandfather's trust, and walked into a life built entirely on her own terms. And for the first time, it felt like home. Moral lessons. This story teaches the power of standing firm in your values, even when the people who should support you try to undermine you. It shows that true strength isn't about reacting with anger, but about staying calm, trusting yourself, and setting clear boundaries. Life will often test your patience and your resolve, especially with those you love, but these tests are opportunities to recognize your worth and protect your future. Never let others dictate your path or diminish your achievements. Your accomplishments and your peace are yours to claim, and sometimes walking away is the bravest, most empowering choice you can make.